This video is going to be a lot longer than the normal type of content I post on this channel. In fact, it's probably going to be around the 1 hour mark. We are going to be breaking into all 52 tier 10s in the World of Tanks Blitz and ranking them in the categories of broke, super strong, strong, good, average, which is, like workable, and then just meh, which is really not the category you want to put your tanks in. So we're going to be breaking into all of those in just a moment. Two things I want to say. First of all, if you want to see more content like this on tier 9, tier 8, tier 7, tier 6, make sure to smash that subscribe button down below, especially because I literally had to go into my garage and screenshot every single one of these tanks to bring them into this tier list. I do put in the effort for you guys. And the second thing is that this is an opinionated video. What I'm saying here is not set in stone. These are my personal opinions, and a lot of you will have your own opinions and probably disagree at some point in this video in what I say. So please know that these are just my opinions, so if you disagree with me, don't call me a moron. Just know that this is how I see the lines and everything else like that. So without further ado, let's get straight into this because it is 3:22 in the morning and I need to get some sleep after this. One other thing I almost forgot to add in, but the category of broken. What does it mean? Because a lot of people have different perceptions of broken. Some people call it overpowered. I have a very different meaning. The word overpowered means it's overperforming compared to the other tanks. However, I just kind of have that in the super strong category. What I have the term broken for is game breaking. What that means is a vehicle that is so strong in one aspect that it breaks the balance of the game. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an overpowered tank. Let's say, for example, the Ho-Ri with its ridiculous penetration. I find that a game breaking aspect, while the vehicle itself may not be the best overall. With everything being said, let's get straight into ranking all of these 52 tier 10 vehicles in their own respective categories, starting off with the first one on the list, the T95E6. Now, in certain aspects, the E6 is a very nice tank. It's got some great mobility, going at 42 kilometers per hour, and as well one of the best power to weight ratios for a tier 10, in fact, more comparable to a medium on power to weight than actually a heavy. So it never really feels sluggish, even though vehicles like the IS-7 and the 111.5A are faster on overall top speed. Because they have much worse power to weights, the E6 contains a much better overall top speed. It as well carries very good DPM at 2850 and as well 340 millimeters of heat pen, so it's got great penetration, especially because that's with gun rammer, pretty good DPM, and because it has 400 damage per shot and plus that mobility and 10 degrees of gun depression, this thing is an absolute beast at bullying medium tanks because you got a lot of DPM, you have an alpha that outtrades against other mediums, and you have armor that is actually very effective against them. But this is where the issues arrive. First of all, it has a massive weak spot on the roof, being that tumor of a cupola. That is a very big weak spot. While it can be very troll to penetrate sometimes, as long as you hit dead center on it, you're going to pen almost every single shot, even in a stock tier 9. It's only about 200 thick. So it's very easy to penetrate the cupola, and it's so tall that you barely even have to expose your tank to try and shoot it when you're aiming at the E6. As well, the tank has absolutely no hull armor on flat ground, and even when using gun depression, if you expose the sides of the turret or the sides of the tank, it's a just shooting gallery, really. It's a turkey fest. It is absolutely horrific at fighting other heavy tanks, especially the newer heavies. So the E6 is a true full-blown heavyum. You can play it like a medium and do great, but it does have its downsides when it has to fight other heavies and super heavies. So because of that, I'm going to put it into the good category. I don't necessarily think there's anything that makes it a bad tank, but I also don't think there's anything that makes it an incredibly strong tank. I just think that it's a good tank that can get the job done if needed to. The T110E4, the next vehicle on the list, is definitely a tank that has its fair share of downsides. In fact, before I even break into its downsides, I'm just going to plop it right into the average category. The issue with the E4 is just the roof. It has that cupola, just like the E6, but this time it's actually a really big limiting factor because not only is the E4 incredibly slow on its reverse speed, only going at 10 in reverse. Oh, it's awful. If you ever get exposed, your trap wheels get penned, you get stuck in the open, and then you can't really reverse. I wish that they would just buff it to like 15 in reverse, something that lets it get back in the cover. But the other issue with the E4 is that roof weak spot. Wargaming, sure, they buffed the turret edges, and that really helped the tank, except not really, because nobody ever shot the edges, they just shot the roof of the tank. Unlike the E6s, which can be a bit troll, and I know a lot of you have probably bounced every now and then, the E4 doesn't really have that issue. You just pen it every every time whenever you see the roof. And judging that it's supposed to play like a pseudo-heavy / tank destroyer, when you actually do play it aggressive mid to late game, it just gets absolutely pummeled. I mean, one shell from an E100 is literally 1/3 of your hit points in an E4, which, yeah, that's going to hurt a lot. And that is why we find the E4 sitting in the workable category. Yes, it can get some very good games out. Unfortunately, when you find yourself in a stressful situation, the E4 just instantly buckles up and explodes. The Concept 1B, however, is a tank that does not find itself in any stressful situation. The Concept 1B is what I like to call the Concept 1 broken. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, the tank goes 45 kilometers per hour with a power-to-weight ratio of 18, which is about the same as an IS-7. So it's a pretty fast tank. It also carries 10 degrees of gun depression, and, well, yeah, let's see what the armor looks like with those 10 degrees. Oh yeah, you can't pen it anywhere. The Kranvagn, when you're using its gun depression, you can at least shoot the roof, and it's quite an easy penetration if you hit it. Yeah, this tank, good luck. You're not having any roof weak spot. There is literally no weak spot. Even this is against Crown Heat with 374 millimeters of pen. You can't pen the Concept, and that is why I've been able to achieve an 88% win rate in this vehicle for almost 70 battles now, and the average player on Blitzstar statistics, over 2,000 people own the Concept now, and with their statistics being placed in, they're at 61% win rate and around 2,700 average damage. Just to put that in perspective, that is like 5% more win rate than the M60-Yoh. This tank is absolutely busted. And, I mean, it's no surprise. The frontal armor is crazy. Even on flat ground, the sides are ridiculously hard to penetrate. Against any APCR shells, I mean, they're almost an auto ricochet even at a 90-degree angle. The Concept also carries a very nice gun, sitting at the same damage per minute as the E6 we just talked about, 2,850 if you are running gun rammer, which is another just crazy thing about the Concept. It's got great damage per minute. So, yeah, the gun is accurate. It's deadly. The real only downside of the Concept, which isn't really even a downside, is the fact that it has a little bit worse heat pen than the other heavies, sitting at 310 base and 340 if you're running Cali, which is what I would suggest to do, bringing your DPM down to 2,650. But even then, I mean, the tank is still so incredibly strong. So, yeah, there's not really much of another reason why I wouldn't put it in the broken category. Making our way over to the T110E3, the bunker of an American tank destroyer. In certain aspects, this vehicle is absolutely loaded. It's got incredible frontal armor, and using its 8 degrees of gun depression, which is a lot for a tank destroyer, you are very, very hard to penetrate. You've only got really one weak spot, which is the cupola that people just like to spam HE at. And that's where the issue with the E3 arrives, is that when you're even hull down, a player like me will just shoot an HE shell at your roof and take off 200 a pop. And if you're in a heavy tank, sure, that wouldn't be the end of the world, but when you're in a tank destroyer that only has around 1,900 hit points, that hurts quite a bit. In fact, just a couple shells like that will bring you down to half health. As well, the other issue with the E3 is the track wheels. Just like the T110E5 and almost every other American vehicle, if you just have a slight angle on the E3's track, you can penetrate right through it, stopping the vehicle, locking it in place, and as well, damaging the tank in the process. It's not a fun endeavor. But the E3, it is definitely a strong tank. It's got great penetration, it's got huge alpha at 640, and even really good DPM, and as long as you're on a map like Mines or Dead Rail where you can actually use it in aggressive positions, oh man, the E3 can be a really, really good vehicle. So I actually think I'm going to put this vehicle into the strong category. I would have put it into the super strong last year, but with how the meta's been changing and how certain vehicles have been buffed, I don't think the E3 really fits into that super strong category anymore. I actually find it very hard to win using it if I'm not in a platoon. And that's really how it is for most tank destroyers, if I'm going to be honest. Next up, we have the Vickers Light. And this vehicle, well, it goes straight into the super strong. Where do I need to start? Well, it's got the highest view range for a tier 10 in the game. View range is extremely important. That means you get to outspot your opponents. But when it's mounted on a light tank, which means that it has better camo than its opponents already, not only do you outspot your opponents, but then you don't get detected yourself, sometimes even after you shoot. So the Vickers Light is great on that aspect. As well, it carries basically the same gun as the FV4202, just the heat gun instead of the Hesh gun. So it's got very nice heat penetration, enough to cut through basically any tier 10 heavies, even E100s if you're running Cali. It carries 100 216 millimeters of HESH penetration with Cali, which does 440 damage a shot. So if you get the sides or rear of any weakly armored tanks, again, that is one turkey farming fest. So the Vickers Light is just great on all of those regards. Oh, and did I forget to mention it also actually has armor. This tank has pretty good turret armor, a mantlet that's able to bounce almost any shell that it receives unless it's from a tier 10 tank destroyer, and as well the upper plate can be extremely troll, bouncing a lot of shells. I'm guessing a lot of you have pretty good grievances when shooting at a Vickers Light. It's an extremely annoying tank to go up against, especially under the hands of a great player, and that is why it is 100% going into the super strong category. And then we move onto the Chieftain Mk. Now, I absolutely love the Chieftain, and I'm actually going to put it right above the E6. It 100% goes into the strong category. It's kind of like an E6, but better in almost every regard. It's got better DPM, it's got better accuracy, better shell velocity, and as well, the tank has the same mobility, going at 42 kilometers per hour. The only issue with the Chieftain is, again, the same type of weakness, the cupola. It's not as large or prolific looking at the E6s, but it still gets exposed a lot of the time you use it, and it's very weak, only around 80 millimeters. So it's quite an easy pen, especially when any decent player's aiming at you, they'll just shoot right at the cupola. As well, if you have over 350-ish millimeters of pen, you can just kind of go right through the roof of the turret as well, kind of like an Object 140's weak spot. So the Mk, it is a very strong tank. The gun is amazing. It's 10 degrees of gun depression plus mobility and HESH. Everything is amazing on the tank, and it is definitely a strong tank. But compared to the super strong tanks we're going to be listing in a bit, I definitely think that it still deserves to stay in the strong category. A tank that doesn't deserve any category is the 183, which is going into just meh. I would put it into workable, but realistically, you're going to get a bad game. If you run a 183, you are expecting that you're probably going to miss half of your shells, and you're going to die. While I've had many fantastic games in the 183, and I've gone on sessions of 40 battles at 70-80% win rate in it, the issue is there's also been sessions where I've gone 20% win rate in it, and I've been on dead rail and missed the broadside of a barn 5 times because the accuracy is absolutely horrific. The 183 can be great, but it can also be absolutely terrible. So I'm putting it in the just meh category because it's not even workable. It's more like luck when you drive that tank. So 100% the just meh category. Over to the Golden Warrior, we have the WZ-121B. This tier 10 Chinese medium is an extremely underrated vehicle in my opinion. A lot of people try to say that the 62A and the 121 are much better than it, but I don't really know where that comes from because the 121B is a mix of both. It has 350 damage per shot. It has the hull of a WZ-121, which means it's way stronger on the upper plate armor than a 62A. As well, the turret on the 121B is much stronger than a 62A. It carries one less degree of gun depression, sitting at 6 degrees, which is still pretty workable on a lot of terrain, especially judging how low down it is, and as well, it has 3,500 damage per minute. I actually really like the 121B. It's a vehicle that is extremely underrated, and I don't really know why, because it gains the alpha, but yet keeps the exact same DPM as a vehicle like the 62A, with extra armor, a higher top speed going at 56. It's just kind of a better 62A in a lot of scenarios. Moving on to the French Tier 10 autoloading heavy, the AMX 50B. This vehicle has almost everything you would want going for an autoloading heavy tank. It's fast, going at 50 kilometers per hour, and as well a power to weight ratio very similar to Tier 10 mediums. It carries 3,000 damage per minute with an incredibly accurate gun, very high amount of premium penetration. Oh, and did I forget to mention, in 6 seconds it is able to dump out 1,200 damage. Yeah, this is not a vehicle you want to mess with, especially under the hands of a good player. The biggest issue with the 50B is the literal bigness part. It's a large tank. It has one of the worst camouflage values in Tier 10. Even sometimes you'll be outspotted through a bush. And that's not great, because that means that when enemies do see you, they're going to pen you almost every time. Your turret is not very thick, and neither is your hull, being at 30 millimeters on the side. Oh, yeah. HE shells from big caliber guns, especially because you don't have spall liner on that tank, are going to wreck your day. But if you're a smart player and you know how to position it, using its, by the way, 10 degrees of gun depression, you can do pretty damn well in that tank, and that's why it's going into the super strong category. It's definitely not super strong for every player, but for somebody that knows how to use it, oh man, that is one scary, scary tank. Making our way over to the Kranvagn, the Tier 10 auto-reloading Swedish heavy tank. This vehicle is not the kind you want to mess with, especially if it's working on a hull-down spot. Its turret is basically impervious to any enemy fire. I mean, you can see on flat ground it's about 370 thick, but now we're going to use this thing using its full 9 degrees gun depression, and I mean, good luck. The upper plate, 505, because it's angled like a pike nose from the IS-7, and yeah, the turret, you can't penetrate it either, and you might be like, well, you could shoot the roof, yeah, until you stick the gun up, and then you can't see it anymore. So this tank is basically impervious when you're using it hull down. The weakest spots are still 380 millimeters thick, which means that no Tier 10 Heavy is actually going to be able to penetrate this vehicle when it uses its gun depression. I love the Kranvagn because of that, and as well, it also carries that auto-reloading gun, which is amazing. You can store up to 3 shells in the vehicle. That, in a matter of 7.5 seconds of dumping, will deal 1,200 damage. And then after that, because you have the single shot capability as well, every 11 seconds you can fire with 2100 DPM a 400 damage shot. So if you add those two numbers together, you have effectively around 3,000 damage per minute for the first minute of firing in the tank with the clip loaded. That's pretty impressive, and that's why this tank is going into the super strong category. A player that knows how to work a cron on a ridgeline is definitely a threat to be very worried about. Even after the nerfs, I still think that that tank holds an incredibly strong category. Unfortunately, the concept kind of takes every other spot because the real downside of the Kranvagn is the turret traverse after they nerfed it, and the mobility. It's not a very fast tank, so it does struggle on that aspect. Now, the AMX 30B, this vehicle I'll put into the average category. I mean, there's not really much that I need to say. You already know about it. It has decent turret armor. It has fantastic mobility, being one of the fastest mediums in Tier 10. Its issue is just it doesn't have the DPM to support itself anymore. Other Tier 10 mediums, even vehicles like the E50M, are now sitting easily over 3,000 damage per minute. And there's no real reason why you would ever want to drive this tank when a vehicle like the STB-1 exists. I mean, the only advantage is mobility, and mobility is great. I mean, there will be times when the STB couldn't get out of scenarios and the 30B can, but it's still just the fact that the 30B doesn't have that DPM. It really, really struggles to support itself. So I hope that in the future, Wargaming does buff its DPM, maybe up to 3,100 or maybe even 3,200. I mean, it's supposed to be a Leopard, so I think that it should get a bit more DPM, but let me know. I think that it's definitely workable. I've done some very good games in it, and it does okay in stressful situations. It just really, really has a tough time fighting other Tier 10 mediums that know what they're doing. Over to the fastest vehicle in the game, we have the Baschatteon 25-ton. This Tier 10 French light tank has some pretty good potential going for it. It has a 3-shell clip, which in a matter of 5.6 seconds is able to dump out 930 damage, the same potential damage as a 183. But unlike the 183, this thing actually has camouflage, fantastic mobility, and a decently accurate gun. The issues arrive with the Batchat when you're fighting other Tier 10 mediums. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone up against 2 mediums that I know I can't fight in this tank. I've taken away one of my medium slots, and now I'm sitting here in a Batchat trying to think, well, I can't fight these 2 hull-down mediums. I can't fight these heavies because I'm not a heavy. Oh shoot, I'm kind of useless this battle. There are a lot of maps where you feel like that in the Batchat. A good example of this might be Mines. On Mines, you feel quite useless in the Batchat, especially if you see another medium tank that is also mobile enough to contend you on the hill, let's say like an enemy FV4202 or a Leopard 1. It's just, the Batchat has a lot of downsides that can really negate the upsides in certain maps. So I'm going to put it into the good category. I do think that you can get some very good games out in it, and it's definitely a good tank. I mean, behind the hands of a good player, it's a great vehicle. It's just, it has a lot of downsides, so I don't think I'm willing to put it in the strong category just yet. I'm hoping that Wargaming makes the intro clip a little bit better, maybe the accuracy, the penetration. It just needs something going for it, and then I'd easily put it in the strong or maybe even super strong category. But up next, we have a tank that is going into the strong category, and this would be the WZ-113 GFT. It's like an E3, but it trades a little bit of armor for mobility. Its upper plate is very strong. In fact, you have to load heat to basically pin it with most Tier 10s. Not only that, but it's got a very good gun. It's got reticle calibration, which means for 15 seconds, it's basically dead eye accurate, which is kind of a scary feat. It's got the same penetration as an Object 268, and it's got really effective armor, as I said, plus a very strong power-to-weight ratio. It's very hard to flank, it's got good armor, it's just kind of got the whole shebang going for it. It's definitely more enjoyable than the E3, and I honestly think in most scenarios you can do better than it in an E3. I just wouldn't put it in the super strong category because realistically, again, tank destroyers really struggle when they are put up against stressful situations, and the 113 GFT, when it is shot in the side, I mean, it's just a giant pinata. It's just a box with wheels, so it definitely has some big downsides. The AMX M454, yeah, easily going right into the super strong area. This tank, I wouldn't say it's broken. There's nothing that really makes the tank game breaking. Sure, it's fast, it's got great mobility, and it's also got great gun depression and everything else going for it, but I don't think there's anything that makes it game-breakingly good. It's just a really strong tank. It's got 480 damage per shot. Frontal armor that is very hard to penetrate, and it's one of the few turrets that cannot even be penetrated by a Ho-Ri using premium shells. So it's a very strong tank in that regard. Its issue is when you expose it. It's a large tank, and just like the 50B we went over, if you expose the sides of this tank, you expose the track wheel, it has a very high chance of just being demolished. So you got to be careful in that regard. But its gun, with its 480 damage per shot, even though it has technically more alpha and the same caliber as an IS-7, it's way more accurate. It's also got AP shells as premium, which means that you butter through enemy armor even when it's angled. So the AMX M4 is definitely a super strong tank. It goes in reverse at 20 kilometers per hour, fantastic power to weight. Just really nothing can defeat the tank if you use it correctly. But I don't think there's also anything really game-breaking about it. It's just a super strong and steady tank. The Foch 155, I would have normally put it into the average workable category, but I'm honestly going to put it into the good category. Why is that? Well, normally if you'd asked me this a month ago, I probably would have said the Foch isn't a great vehicle. But honestly, I've driven it about 60 games in the past month, and I haven't had really any problems with it. I've averaged over a 70% win rate. I've done around 3,500 average damage in it. That's pretty strong for what I thought was a very bad vehicle. The Foch does have downsides. Its gun is incredibly inaccurate, and as well, its track wheels are just, oh, they make the E3's track wheels look amazing. The issue with the Foch is that, and the sides and the rear are absolutely terrible to penetrate, and it's very slow, so it takes a while to turn. Not on acceleration, I want to point that out. It's slow on traverse speed. Because it's such a long banana, it's very easy to shoot in the sides and the rear. It's very quick on acceleration. It's extremely fast, should I add. It's able to go up to 50 kilometers per hour, and it can get out some pretty deadly shells. It has a 7.5 second injury clip, and a lot of people for some reason don't realize this. So I've shot people with the first shell for 560, and then they won't realize I have a second shell that quickly. They'll poke me, even in a medium, and then bam, I'll shoot them again. So I do think the Foch has some very good potential. It's super fast, its frontal armor's great. It's just that it definitely struggles in a stressful situation. So I'll put it in the good category. Nothing great about it, nothing bad about it, just the good tank. Moving over to the Progetto 65, this Tier 10 Italian auto-reloading medium tank is currently my favorite medium in the game. Now, why is that? Well, it's because of the auto-reloading gun. I love the ability of having flexibility, and that is what the Progetto has. You can dump off 1,050 damage in a matter of 6 seconds, but then you also have the flexibility of having a single-shot gun. Sure, your DPM might be a little bit worse than the average medium at around 2,600, but at least you have 2,600 DPM. After you've dumped out 1,000 damage into somebody, they're still going to lose that fight to you because they're already half health, even if you have less damage per minute. So that makes it extremely flexible. It also goes 58 kilometers per hour forward, and an upper plate that is very troll. In fact, using just slight gun depression makes it an auto ricochet to almost any shell in the game. There's one issue with this tank, and that is why I'm not going to be putting it into the super strong category, but just the strong. The issue is the turret armor. This tank's turret is really bad. I mean, it's only like 150 thick. And what that means is when you're up against, again, vehicles like the STB-1, the 62A, or really any haul-down medium, you just kind of get bullied because you can't pen them, and they can pen you back every single time you poke. And when you add that in with the very bad dispersion of 0.326, one of the big balancing factors Wargaming did when they initially nerfed this vehicle was they made the accuracy much worse than the average medium, which I understand, but it can be very infuriating. So I definitely think that I'll put it in the strong category just because against other mediums, you have to be really careful. But I do really like the tank, and it is a fantastic vehicle. Next up on the chopping block, we have the T57 Heavy, the Tier 10 American autoloading heavy tank. And yeah, this vehicle, we're just going to drag it right up here to begin with. The 57 Heavy is an absolutely busted tank. Not only does it have one of the most accurate heavy tank guns in Tier 10, ridiculously quick turret traverse with very accurate .308 dispersion, but as well, it has ridiculous amounts of pen with 374 millimeters on the heat, if, and you should, be running calibrated shells. Not only that, but it has 3,000 DPM on the tank, which is crazy, and it carries a 2.5 second injury clip, so in a matter of 5 seconds, it dumps out 1,200 damage. It is an extremely unforgiving and stupid tank to fight against, especially after Wargaming changed the hull, gave it PBR, and now a lot of players that don't understand how to fight it shoot the lower plate and bounce every single time. The T57 Heavy is just such a stupid tank to fight. And as I said before, the reason it's in the broken category is just because of that gun. It is such a deadly gun. It's almost a little bit too deadly, me and my friends do find. Oh boy, here we have the sad story of the T110E5. Last year, the E5 easily would be sitting in the super strong category. It has speed boost, it has great armor, hull down capabilities, and a really solid gun on damage per minute. Unfortunately, that last thing I said, which was damage per minute, was taken away from the E5 in one of the latest updates of the game, which means that now it's going from super strong to, ooh, not strong, yeah, just into good. I still think the E5 is a good tank. I made a video talking about it, and I said that you can still do some pretty good things in it. It's just that when you're fighting other heavies, oh, it feels like such a drag. You just hit them for a measly 400, and then they out-reload you. It's a pain. The E5, it's still got the armor, it's still got the reactive, it's still got all of that, but it just doesn't have the DPM, which is definitely something that is important when trying to kill very healthy tier 10 heavies. The Patton, well, that's a tank that has done the opposite. It was a tank that would have been in the good, and now it has put itself easily into the super strong category. The Patton is just great. I mean, it's got fantastic DPM after they've buffed it. It's very, very accurate on the move. And even then, it's also got fantastic hull-down capabilities, sitting at 9 degrees of gun depression. I just think the M48 Patton in almost every single scenario is a great tank. It's got a boat-shaped hull, which means it'll bounce a lot of shells. It's just a fantastic vehicle. I would say, in a lot of scenarios, I would prefer it over the STB-1, and that's why, in fact, it's being used in tier 10 comp right now. Definitely a super strong vehicle. The Jagdpanzer E100, I would actually put, believe it or not, in the good category. Now, you might be wondering, wait, why? Why not in the average category? Well, I played the Jagdpanzer a bit, and I always like to play tanks before I make my opinion on them every single year. So I played this tank, I did a live stream on it, played about 30 games in it. We did okay, we did about 70% with 3,500. I think my stats are still on there. But it actually did pretty good. And why is that? Well, it's got armor. That's the big thing. The 183 does not have armor. And the Jagdpanzer does. And not only that, but the Jagdpanzer has alpha, which means it stops enemies from pushing, and it's also got pretty good DPM and decent accuracy, plus fantastic heat penetration. I don't think it's anything better than good. I mean, you can work it well. If you're a good player and you actually know how to use this big box's armor, it does well. But yeah, apart from that, I wouldn't really put it anything past good. It is a nice tank in certain games, but it definitely has its moments where it can be really, really bad. So I'll put it in the good category for now. That one's a bit iffy, though. I'll put it in between, like, good and average. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Jag in the comments. FV4202, that one, a lot of you might not agree with how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to put it in the workable category. Now, why is that? Well, 4202 relies on one thing, and that is the gun. There's nothing else that is important about the tank. If you are driving a 4202 and it is not about that Hesh gun, there is something wrong with you. And the issue with that Hesh gun is, first of all, you don't have pen, right? So if you're up against hull down mediums, which is the new meta in Blitz, you're going to have struggling amounts of pen to cut through them. But as well, you don't have turret armor. That is the big issue with the tank. I streamed today, and I absolutely wrecked a 4202 in my T22 medium because A, it couldn't pen me when I was side scraping, and then I just penned it every single time it tried poking me. That is the issue with the 4202. It's against mediums, just like the Bat Chat. Its turret doesn't work. It doesn't do a good job brawling. Now, its gun is fantastic. If you can get that Hesh working on flat ground, yeah, then it will be fantastic. But it definitely has its downsides, and that's why I'm putting it in workable. There are games when I've played in the 4202, and I feel literally useless. And then there are games that, well, I'll do 7,000 damage. I mean, I did 7,000 twice in a row in the tank at one point, but it's definitely a tank that you have to kind of have a good lineup to really showcase what it can do. So that's why I'm going to put it into the workable category. You have to hope that RNG kind of is on your side for the enemies you do go up against. FV4005, that one as well, it's going into the workable. This tank, just like the 4005, has the issue of it kind of relies on the enemy lineup you have. If you are up against vehicles that are going to outspot you, if you're up against tanks that just, you know, are going to kill your team before you even have a chance to get out damage, the 4005 sucks. If your team falls apart in this tank, you're going to die. Even if you farm up 6,000 damage. I can't tell you how many times I've racked out so many huge damage numbers in the 4005 and still lost just because it has literally no armor. It's mobile. It goes 35 kilometers per hour, and if you're using speed boost, it can get up pretty quick, actually. It might even go 40. But it's just, the issue is that every time you are dealing with a stressful situation, it's not like, oh, I might have a chance of doing something here. No, the 4005 really does not have a chance. Anybody that knows how to fight it just pokes it, snaps a shell into the turret, and backs up. It is such an easy shot, and the turret's literally 14 millimeters thick. Yeah, it's a very situational tank. The Ho-Ri, well, we already talked about it earlier. That one's going into the broken. Why? It's the gun. The tank itself, I don't think is that broken. It's troll. I mean, I guarantee a lot of you out there in the comments have very, very horrific stories of you shooting at a Ho-Ri when it's wiggling like a madman at you, like a psychopath, and then you bounce off its little gun that sticks out on the front, or you hit the hull and it just ricochets at a weird angle. That's what the Ho-Ri's famous for. It's just an annoying tank that I hate fighting. But the thing about the Ho-Ri that's really annoying is the gun. It doesn't matter how skilled you are at the game, how many brain cells you have, as long as you tap your premium ammunition key, you're going to pen everything, even a hold-down cron. It's stupid. That is the thing about the Ho-Ri. I mean, it makes an IS Force turret look like literal butter that Paula Deen would be using for her next batch of brownies. It does not work well against a Ho-Ri. So that's why it's going into the broken category. It's nothing about the tank itself being overpowered. It's just the fact that that gun is definitely a bit busted. I just think that they should lower not the DPM, the penetration on it a little bit so that, it doesn't negate all armor in the game. The WZ-113A is a very mobile Chinese heavy tank. It is able to reach a top speed of 50 kilometers per hour. It has 460 damage per shot, fantastic gun depression at 7 degrees, and a damn near impervious turret that even a Ho-Ri will struggle to pen. It doesn't feel like it's ever in a situation that is against its will. It can actually do pretty well even against some of the strongest heavies. It's just that it doesn't have enough of DPM or armor going for it. I can't tell you how many times after my team has started to fall apart, the enemy heavies just don't care anymore and they drive over the hill and kill me because I don't have armor on the hull. I don't have enough DPM to scare them off or at least bleed them enough that at that point they don't want to push me. That is one of the biggest issues I've always had over the 900 battles in my 5A, and that's why I'm going to leave it in the good category and really not much after that. I do think it can get some great games out. A lot of people that have owned it told me they really enjoy playing it, but I can definitely tell you that I still think it needs just a little bit more of something going for it to make it comparable to vehicles like the 60 TP and the M60-Yoh. Now, a tank that I do think is very, very strong is the TVP 5051. This Czechoslovakian autoloading medium tank has a couple great things going for it. First of all, it is extremely mobile, comparable to the Leopard 1 on mobility, reaching a top speed of 60 kilometers per hour. As well, it carries a 4-shell gun that is able to dump out 1,240 damage in a matter of 6 seconds. Sound familiar? Oh yeah, very similar to the AMX 50B on that regard. It's also very accurate. There is one issue, though, with the gun, and that is penetration. Oof, it's really, really bad heat pen. And even the standard pen, it really struggles to deal with opponents at distance, especially if you're shooting at E100 turrets and stuff. Even with Cali, that is a big balancing factor of the TVP. But with that mobility and the camouflage, oh, you can just come up behind somebody, 1,200 damage, gone on a medium tank and drive away. Yeah, I mean, that's devastating. Or you get the side of a heavy. It's basically like a bat chat, but better in almost every single aspect. The only issue is its DPM and its penetration. Well, I guess you could say the armor. It doesn't really have any armor, but that's what you get when you have such a fast amount of mobility. Definitely, though, in the super strong category for me. 60 TP as well is going in the super strong category. I've played this tank a lot. I've played it in comp. I've played it in pubs. I've got almost 500 battles in it trying to see what the heck I think of it, and I definitely don't think much of it. While it is a super strong tank, in my opinion, I don't really love playing it. Its gun is incredibly inaccurate. It is the least accurate tier 10 heavy gun in the game, which makes it very frustrating. You will miss very easy shots, even sometimes of opponents 100 meters in front of you, because of how inaccurate the gun is. As well, its DPM, while it is quite good if you're running tungsten and adrenaline, when you're doing that, you sacrifice your repair kits. And when you only have one repair kit, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a 60 TP get its driver killed or its ammo rack damaged, and that's it. I mean, if that happens, you are donezo in a 60 TP. So it's all about the sacrifice. But yeah, the ability to have 7 degrees of gun depression, plus 600 alpha, plus fantastic frontal armor, and as well that 21 km per hour reverse speed when you're running gear oil, that is impressive. And if you run the tank correctly, it will be a very, very, very menacing tank. So 100% going in the super strong category. The Sheridan, well, it's the same as last year. It's going into the broken category. Why is it going there? Well, it's because of the gun and the mobility and the armor. The Sheridan is completely covered in spaced armor. The point of a light tank is that you sacrifice armor for mobility. Well, not this tank. You can't HE it, so that's already out of the question. Second part of that, the Sheridan, well, it's got a 560 damage per shot gun. But unlike most of the 152 millimeters in Blitz, this one's actually very accurate. In fact, it's the most accurate on movement dispersion for a 152 in the game. That is not base dispersion, I just want to point that out. I'm talking about the on-movement dispersion. That means when you're driving the tank, the gun won't bloom. When you compare it to a 49, I mean, it's night and day. So you can easily snap these big alpha shots into the enemy and then say, haha, and drive away. Oh, also you've got 10 degrees of gun depression. Yeah, I just hate fighting up against Sheridans. I cannot tell you how annoying it is when there's a decent player in a Sheridan that just randomly pops up to the side of me, snaps me for a 560, and drives away. And I bet you all have those very irritating instances as well. So that's why I'm putting the tank in broken. It's just that gun. I still absolutely hate fighting them. And every chance I get, I will 100% tunnel a Sheridan because I just hate dealing with them later on in the battlefield. They can really ruin your game. Next up, we have the WZ-113. This tank, it's going to go into the strong. I wouldn't do it in the super strong because of that mobility it carries. Oh, God, the traverse speed is terrible. But, yeah, it's definitely strong. I mean, that gun, the ability to get 3,440 DPM with some pretty nice heat pin at 340, plus decent accuracy, and as well, not too bad armor is great. I mean, it does sacrifice quite a bit of armor for that DPM, quite a bit of mobility, but it still reaches 50 kilometers per hour in a straight line. It is a very strong tank. So that is why I would put it into the strong category, because it can get great games out. It's just that when you get into a battle that doesn't go your way, you're up against a medium that decides, hey, I'm going to make fun of this guy. It's really not a fun experience. So you got to be very conscious in a 113 of where you're positioning the tank. Personally, I believe Wargaming should lower the DPM to like 3,000 and then just increase the traverse speed, but that is my personal opinion. The WZ-121 is basically a 113, but better, so that's why it's going into the super strong. It's mobile, it goes 56 kilometers per hour. It's got great upper plate armor, which means that you can bounce a lot of shells. Not only that, but it has 420 damage per shot, the same DPM as the WZ-113 at 3,440, and as well a ridiculous aiming time at less than 2 seconds. That is insane. So because of that, the 121, it just kind of has everything going for it. You know, normally when you get a tank like the 121, you'd think that you sacrifice, you know, DPM for the alpha or accuracy for the alpha. Nah, this tank, it doesn't sacrifice anything. It's got mobility, alpha, armor, gun depression. It's got the whole thing. You don't want to fight a WZ-121, especially if it's a decent player. And that's also the case for the STB-1, and this is another very strong Tier 10 medium. It's a hull-down medium. It's one of the highest performing tanks still in Tier 10, and why is that? Well, it's got 10 degrees of gun depression, 3,000 DPM, a very accurate gun with .308 dispersion, a decent top speed of 53 kilometers per hour, and armor out the kazoo on its upper plate and turret. When you are using that thing hull down, even though it has quote-unquote turret cheeks and a cupola that you can pen, yeah, it normally doesn't happen. If you're on like Normandy Hill, Castilla Hill mines, you can basically sign in your petition to give up if you're in another medium tank, because that thing will literally bully you until you are dead. I hate fighting STBs. They're such a strong tank. And yeah, it is definitely a game ruiner if you're in any vehicle that does not have the amount of gun depression that vehicle does have. The FV207 Badger, I'm going to put it into workable. It's not a waste of money, but it's definitely... No, it is a waste of money. Let me fix that. The FV207 Badger is a waste of money. I would never suggest to buy it. But it can get out decent games. That's why I'm not going to put it into the just useless category. It can do okay, but for the most part, the Badger, it struggles. Its on-movement dispersion is absolutely terrible, which means every time you turn the tank, you turn the gun, you got to aim in, which makes no sense. It's a slow-moving tank destroyer. Why doesn't it have an accurate gun? It does have good DPM at around 3,500. It's got nice alpha. It's kind of like an Object 263, just without the mobility and a little bit more armor. Hull down-wise, 10 degrees of gun depression. It can do well, just not in every scenario. Super Conk, we'll put that into the strong category. It's like an E5, but better. It's got the same DPM the E5 used to have, which is great. It carries HESH. It's got hull down capabilities. Its turret is covered in spaced armor, which means heat shells have a very hard time of penetrating it. The upper plate is covered in effective armor, which means that you actually can't penetrate it, or should I say ERA. Basically what that means is you can't penetrate it with heat on the upper plate. It's actually stupid. People don't realize that. They try and pen it, and bam, you bounce every shell. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression, which is 2 more than the E5, and it also goes 35 kilometers per hour with a very nice power to weight ratio. The only reason it doesn't go in super strong is because of how easy it is to murder. It is such a large target, and it's just like a Conqueror, where when you catch this thing off guard, it's an easy track wheel. It's an easy penetration on the side. Its turret is very weak on the sides. It's a great tank, but it definitely has downsides that will kill you in the midst of battle. And now we've made our way to the third column of tanks, being the Object 907 starting off. Now, the Object 907, a lot of you might disagree with this, but it's going straight into the super strong category. Any good player that knows how to run a 907 will vouch that it is an incredible tank. Not only is it currently the #1 performing medium, that's pretty impressive, but there's reasons behind it. I mean, it's fast. It's actually the fastest tank in tier 10 on acceleration. It also has the same camouflage as a Batchat and a Vickers Light when it's sitting still in a bush. But it also has the Russian DPM levels. It's got 3,300 DPM, 310 damage per shot, good accuracy, and it's got a really, really stupid turret. You actually, like, even hull down cannot penetrate the turret on a 907 with heat shells because of the way it is shaped. So it's just a super annoying tank to deal with. The upper plate can get a lot of bounces. The sides are angled. It's a great tank. They are a menace to fight, especially if they're a good player. And the 907, that's why it is the #1 performing medium currently in Blitz. So yeah, pretty amazing tank. Absolutely loved playing it. I'm like 74% in it right now. It's just a great vehicle to drive. It's a blast, and if you can use that mobility plus the DPM, is that a fun vehicle to drive. Now we got the FV4205B, and yeah, it's going in the just meh. Sure, it is average and workable, but why am I putting it in the just meh? Well, the 215B's main thing was the gun, right? It had 3,000 DPM, and that was it. I mean, it had the gun going for it, but now its gun really isn't, like, the main thing. The Chieftain Mk gun is honestly better than an FV4205B gun, so there's really no reason why to drive this tank. I'll still put it in the average, because you can get a decent game out in it. It's still got, you know, some workability, but for the average person, I would never, ever suggest to drive it. So we'll leave it in the average spot for now. The T22 medium, it's going to go into the super strong category. Just like the 907, it's got very similar attributes. A turret that is very hard to penetrate. In fact, those cupolas that you might have tried to shoot at, those don't exist. That's actually just little, like, details that Wargaming put on. Those cupolas don't exist on the T22. It really has no turret weak spot. The upper plate is very troll to penetrate, especially when the player's wiggling it correctly. It can reverse side scrape, being basically impervious to armor. Its sides are very troll because of the triangular shape, and it also has around 3,400 damage per minute with a top speed of 56. Sorry, almost ran out of things to say there. That was great about the tank. Is there a downside? Well, no, there really isn't. You know, if you want a downside, it is called bad players that think that they're good driving the tank, and the ammo rack. I cannot tell you how many times I've ammo racked T22s in the side. Oh boy, does it really, really struggle in that aspect. But yeah, the T22 overall, nice tank. It can get some good damage out, do its job very well. So I like the T22. It's not the most enjoyable tank to play. That's the only thing I'll say about it. You'll play it for like 100 games, and you'll be like, wow, okay, cool. And then you'll never play it again. But yeah, very, very strong tank. Obviously, it's always been a super, super strong vehicle. Object 263 as well is going into the super strong category. This is the only tank destroyer I will be putting into the super strong category. Now, why is that? Well, it's because it has that mobility. It has the DPM. It's got everything going for it. After Wargaming buffed the one issue, and I've been begging for Wargaming to do this for years, they finally have. The mantlet on the 263 was an easy pen. Any tier 10 loaded heat, bam, right through the mantlet every time. Now, well, you can't do that. It's like a 400mm thick mantlet that has spaced armor behind it as well. So now you can't penetrate the thing in the mantlet, which means that it can get away with being incredibly aggressive. Also, they buffed the traverse speed. I mean, now it's able to bounce shells, it's got still that ridiculous armor, and it's got the DPM of 3,856. Yeah, it's not a tank you want to play against. If a decent player is using it, oh my god, is it one pain to fight. I hate fighting 263s, especially when they try and YOLO in. Oh boy, they are one menace to fight. Object 140, we'll put in the good. I don't think there's anything per se wrong with the 140. It's got an okay turret. Its upper plate can get bounces. The sides are actually very troll. It's just the fact that the 62A is better. Why would you drive an Object 140 when you can drive a 62A? I mean, sure, there are people, and I know a lot of good people. In fact, one of my friends who's in Joker will probably argue he likes the 140 better. Unfortunately, it just doesn't have really any upsides over the 62A anymore. It's a nice tank, but I can't really see myself saying that its gun's better than the 62As or really anything is better apart from the mobility and that bit of troll armor on the sides. It's got worse gun depression, worse accuracy, and the same DPM. There's no reason why you'd want to drive a 140 apart from a bit of that nostalgia and the more fun factor feeling. I do think the 140 is a lot more fun to drive. Moving on to the 268, we'll put this in the strong. I think just like the 113 GFT and the E3, the 268 can do a very good job against enemy opponents. It's got super troll armor. It's based off of the hull armor of an IS-8, so you can get some super troll bounces on that upper plate, especially if you're using the 8 degrees of gun depression, a very accurate gun. It goes 50 kilometers per hour. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's just that it's a tank destroyer, and they get very easily overwhelmed by enemy opponents, especially with the bigger alpha tank destroyers and, you know, the heavy tanks now that exist like the M60 and the 60 TP. I don't really find it hard to deal with 268s anymore. Yeah, they can be a pain when they shoot you, but it's not like you see them YOLOing up in the front line anymore. They can't be aggressive as much. Because of that, I'm going to put it into the strong. You can still get some great games out in a 268. It's still a great tank. It's got that penetration, the accuracy. But yeah, I definitely think it's lost a bit of its spark since it originally was introduced into the game and after it's received its couple of buffs. Grille 15, I'll put this, again, into the same category as the 4005. It's basically the same reasoning. It struggles. Whenever your team sucks, it struggles. I can't tell you how many times I will hate playing the Grille because I'll sit in the back of the map, I'll farm 4,000, 5,000 damage, and I'll be like, oh wow, I'm a 1 versus 4. And in a Grille, you don't win those 1 versus 4s because you got no armor. Your turret is just, I mean, yeah, it's a Grille. It doesn't really need much more of an explanation than that. Its gun's great. It's amazing on the accuracy. It's possibly the best gun in tier 10 when it comes to the accuracy, the DPM levels. But it's just the fact that you rely on your team, which is why it's going to go into the workable category. You can work an amazing game, but yeah, it's not like a Jagdpanzer where you actually have armor and you can go up in the front line. The IS-4, this thing's going to still go into the super strong category. I still think that the IS-4 has everything going for it. It's got good DPM. It's got fantastic frontal armor. How many times have you shot the track wheel of an IS-4 when you think it's a pen and it says it's a pen and then it just says, that one didn't go through? Or you'll shoot at the lower plate at an angle that looks like it's a pen and that goes, that one didn't go through. It is one of the most annoying things in the world. That is why the IS-4 still goes in the super strong. Sure, it got nerfed a little bit, but the nerf didn't really do anything. All they did was lower the hit points by 100 in the turret traverse. It's not like it was meant to have good turret traverse to begin with, and the hit points are still plenty to last you through the battle. So yeah, IS-4 staying in that super strong category. Absolutely love playing the tank. I mean, the other day I absolutely demolished a 60 TP using it just in a 1v1. Now we have the VK7201K, and this tank, we'll put it into the strong. I wouldn't say it's great by any means, but it can work things, you know? It's got the gun depression, it's got 7 degrees, it's got turret armor, and it's got frontal armor. The nice thing about this tank is that if you only expose your front to the enemy, they will have to shoot heat to penetrate it, which is great. That means that you're saving your hit points because they have to shoot heat, and as well when you're using it with your turret armor, it's kind of like the tier 8 larva where, yeah, you can be penned in the turret, but as long as you aim dead at your opponents, it's a very tricky pen, and what's aiming back at them is a 640, 150 millimeter cannon that will definitely rock their world if it's able to penetrate. You've also got that HE ammunition that lets you splash, but it is slow, so it does suffer on the fact that if your team sucks, you're probably going to go down in a burning ball of flame. So that's why I'm going to put it in the strong. There's definitely nothing that makes it super strong, but it can do pretty well. Same for the E100. I'm just going to plop that there right now. It's a very similar circumstance where it's got the hit points, it's got that sheer pushing capability, but at the same time, if your team kind of sucks, you have that exact same scenario. They are very similar tanks, and that's why I'm going to put them in the exact same scenario. Object 260, it's going to go into the workable. It can do things. I mean, the other day I streamed with it, and I did a 5,600 damage game, and it was going great until it was a 1 versus 3. And at that point, I couldn't do anything. If I was in an IS-7, I probably could have won that battle. But this tank doesn't have the armor that an IS-7 does. So when your team falls apart, or whenever you need to do anything that's a bit stressful, you just get penned and you bleed, and then later game, you don't have the hit points to win. So the 260, it's nice. It's got a great gun. Definitely the best gun of the Russian heavies currently in the game. But it's not enough to save it from being a workable tank. IS-7, obviously that thing's going into the super strong category. The armor on the IS-7 is ridiculous. The sides are so stupid. I cannot tell you how many times I've aimed at the sides of an IS-7, and it's just gone, that one didn't go through, because it hits that little bar of spaced armor, or even if it doesn't, it'll sometimes just ricochet whenever it decides to. You shoot the front track wheel, that one didn't. It is so irritating when you shoot at an IS-7 that you know even before you fire that there's a possibility that this shell will not like you, and it will just say, nope, we're not going to penetrate. I hate fighting IS-7s. Not only that, but the armor on the front is great. The turret is fantastic. It's got big alpha, and even though the pen's not amazing, that's really the only downside of the tank, as it even goes 50 kilometers per hour. After the IS-7 got PBR, it is definitely one of the strongest tier 10s in the game. The Mouse, that is another very, very capable tank, but we're going to put it into the strong category. Sure, the nerf hurt its dispersion a little bit, but it's a Mouse. It's a tank that's supposed to be up in the front line. If you're worrying about dispersion on this tank, you've got the whole wrong mindset. The Mouse is a tank that you are driving up in the front, you are taking shots for your team, and you are driving, like, into the opponents. That is at least how I played my Mouse, and I was able to achieve #1 in the tank for the whole month that I did that for Blitz Star statistics. So it seems that it works that way, and that is why, even after Wargaming nerfed the Mouse, I really don't see it being much of an issue. It's still got that same, like, big armor profile that opponents that don't understand how to pen or kind of panic when dealing with the Mouse have trouble dealing with. Another thing that's a common misconception about the Mouse is its DPM. It's actually got a fine gun. It's got 460 damage per shot, which is a pretty beefy alpha, and as well it's got like 2600 DPM. It's very on par with the other tier 10 heavies, and judging that you just have a lot more hit points, it's actually pretty nice. I like the Mouse. Very nice tank, and you can do some very, very deadly things in that vehicle. The T-62A, well, we just went over that when we were talking about the other mediums. And yeah, the 62A, it's definitely going in the super strong category. We're almost running out of room here. But yeah, the 62A, it can get out very, very strong games. It's got that great DPM, 7 degrees of gun depression, fantastic mobility. I mean, it's a bit slower on the mobile side overall. It only goes 50, but it gets up to speed very quickly. So it's still nice on mobility. But the accuracy is literally a laser beam. It does not miss no matter what when you are aiming at the opponent. So that is a great thing about the T-62A. It's one of the reasons why it's such a deadly tank, and 100% why it's going in super strong. When we make our way over to the VK90, yeah, it's going to the broken. The VK90 is still such a stupid tank to fight. There has never been a battle when I've been in a VK90 where I've been like, wow, I can't fight this guy. It just doesn't happen because your armor is so stupid, and you have 10 degrees over the side, so it's not like you don't have gun depression. You can easily work it hull down. You've got turret armor that has basically no weak spot apart from these tiny, tiny little cupola on the roof and little teeny little cheeks on the side that, yeah, good luck hitting. I even struggle to hit them. It's like a maybe 1 out of 5 shot when I'm shooting at the tank 100 meters away. Plus, the tank has a lot of hit points. It goes 30 kilometers per hour. It's way more accurate than the IS-7, even though it carries the exact same alpha. It's basically a Mouse, but better in every single scenario when you're playing it in a pub game, and that's why the VK90 is definitely a broken tank. How many times have you aimed at the side of a VK90 with heat and it said it's going to pen, and then it just doesn't? Yeah, it's an annoying tank, and that's why it still sticks up there in the broken category. M60, this tank, it's going up there with the M48 Patton. We'll just kind of plop it, where's the M48? We'll just kind of plop it right there with the M48 Patton. It's got that same attribute of the hull down capabilities, plus the boat-shaped hull, and as well the great upper plate. The M60 is definitely better than the Patton in pubs. I'm not sure about comp. I've had that discussion a lot, but at least in pubs it is better. The upper plate on the M60 is thicker. The turret is thicker. It's got 1 more degree of gun depression, and I think the gun's a little bit more accurate if I'm not mistaken. So because of that, the M60 is just an all-around better tank. It's not much better than the M48 Patton. You know, overall, if you gave me a choice of either one, I probably wouldn't really care because they're both very similar. But the M60, it's better in most cases because of that extra gun depression, because of the accuracy, and the upper plate armor and the turret being a bit stronger. Leopard 1, I'm going to put the Leopard 1 into, I'm trying to think here, honestly, I would put it into super strong. Now, it's a bit of a contradiction here, right? The Leopard 1, it's got issues. I want to point this out now, that this tier list is not for players that do not understand how to play this game. Obviously, I'm not going to tier list tanks and put them for the average 40%er. This is for people that will understand how to use their tanks. And the Leopard 1, it's a great vehicle. It has the most DPM for a medium in tier 10 at 3,000, almost 700. And plus the best accuracy at tier 10. How do you fight it? I mean, obviously you can fight it quite easily because it has no armor, but if you are a smart player in a Leopard, you use it like a mobile tank destroyer. You see a medium tank that is exposed, bam, easy shot. You never miss. I mean, every time I play this tank, it is so nice to just have that ability of like, I'm going to aim it on this weak spot, and I have a very high chance of hitting it. It's not like when you're in an STB and you're like, I'm going to aim it on this weak spot, and I could hit it. The Leopard, you almost every time hit the shot. It's amazing on that aspect. 0.272 dispersion, plus that DPM, plus the shell velocity capacity, plus the fact that the thing goes 66 kilometers per hour, it is definitely a super strong tank if you can run it right, and that's why it's still one of the most popular tanks in Tier 10. It's power to the player. If you can use it right, oh man, is that a great tank. M60, yeah, it's going up here. The M60, it's just the gun. The 2-shot gun on the M60 is what is going in the broken category, not the 3-shot. Now, I do think the 3-shot still makes the tank overpowered, but I'd put it in the super strong if we're talking about the 3-shot. The 2-shot gun in pubs is broken because of the amount of damage it is able to get out in such a short succession of time. It literally says, bang, bang. That's 900 hit points gone. But you actually have hit points. It's like basically using a 183, but you actually have armor, gun depression, and hit points. I mean, it's stupid. And it's not even a slow tank. It's actually quite fast. It has a great power-to-weight ratio. Oh, and I forgot the track suspension system, that when you get shot, you have the reserve track that lets you reverse at 5 kilometers per hour, even if it's broken. Yeah, that's also pretty busted. The M60, the 2-shot gun is just stupid. The ability to knock off half of anybody's hit point pool in a literal 2-second spur and then back in the cover, I hate that. I absolutely hate it. I hope Wargaming removes the gun, but my guess is they never will. But that's what I hope for the Yo is, yeah, that tank's pretty busted. E50M, well, you probably guessed this one as well. Let's go on over here next to the Leopard in the super strong category, finishing off the list. The E50M, why is it so strong? Well, Wargaming recently buffed it, and not only did they buff the DPM, but they also buffed the acceleration of the tank, which yeah, makes it so good at getting into positions, working its job. It's going to be a great tank. I think that the E50M, it's just so nice. I would definitely rate it, in my opinion, above a Leopard 1, but I'm not going to put it in the broken category because it's definitely far from broken. It's just a great tank that can do a lot of things very well. So let me know what you guys think about today's video. Do you agree with my tier list? But yeah, I mean, there's only one tank in the just meh category, which is the 183. I mean, that's where I'd really put it. I was being a bit generous this time. The Badger, I don't love it, but it can work a good game, I guess. Hopefully, all of you enjoyed today's video. It's been a while since we've done our tier list. The only thing I'm a little worried about is that after the time of this tier list being uploaded, Wargaming is going to rebalance tier 10 like they've done to tier 9, or they're going to do the tier 9 at the time of recording this, and what they've already done the tier 8. If they do that, then I might make a quick follow-up and change a couple of the positions on these vehicles. But for now, this is my tier list, and hopefully it helps you guys figure out what tanks you want to play in tier 10. There's a lot in that super strong category. Honestly, tier 10 is pretty balanced. You can see that I don't think there's many vehicles that are objectively a lot broken. I mean, there are vehicles like the Sheridan, the M60. There are a bunch of tech trees up there. There's an even amount of tech trees and as well premiums up there. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. This obviously took a while to make, so please consider smashing that subscribe button. Bye-bye.